This is a big one. Does your calendar demonstrate your values? Are you taking time for yourself, for your health, for your family? Your calendar is the bright neon sign for your values. What you say and what you fill your days, weeks, months, and years with must be aligned. And all too often, there's a sense of, I know what I need to do, but I can't seem to do it. It's common sense. And you probably know all too well that common sense isn't always common practice. So it's time to think about what you value and what you can live into and how you can live into those values just a little more. Think about who you want to become over the next 3 to 5 years. Who do you really want to be? You know, most people take more time planning their vacation than they do planning who they want to become. And my guess is that this may very well be the very first time that you've thought about that. Most people know deep down that they are bigger than the life that they are living. And in terms of your mental health and how you impact those around you, it's time to ask yourself, who do I want to become? It's quite possible that you're feeling slightly unfulfilled in your daily life. You love helping people. It's what got you into this profession in the first place. And yet there's an ache. There's an ache. You know that you could do more, have more, be more. You know that you've put some things on hold. Well, because someday. And that brings us back to the calendar where someday doesn't exist. So what ache do you have inside? You set out on a path where you thought you'd feel fulfilled and successful by now, and you realized that there really is more. Some people dull that ache with alcohol or drugs. Others use TV. Some people work out fiendishly to prove that at least they're healthy, and others simply withdraw. If you're not feeling truly fulfilled in your life, or if you know someone who's aching to break free from their current life, you're not alone. You set your sights on a target and you work toward it, and now that you're living it, it's not as fulfilling as you thought. This is not meant to bring you down. It's meant to put some truth in front of you so that you can feel empowered once more. The thing most people miss is that the journey changes you. What you thought you would feel like success when you first started out doesn't feel as fulfilling as you thought. That's the bad news. And really, again, I'm not here to bring you down. The thing is that it is true for almost 100% of the people I encounter. And I find it out because I dare to ask those kinds of questions. So the good news is twofold. First, you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling that way. And second, you have a chance to live the life you really want. And that brings us to mindset magic. I use the framework magic to help you think about how to reclaim your life in a way that's a little different from where you are now. The idea here is that when you raise your awareness, you become a leader for those around you, and you serve to lift those around you. So let's explore mindset magic. Magic. The M in magic stands for mindset. Your mindset matters more than anything. It matters more than your family, your business, and dare I say, it matters even more than your connection spiritually. Here's why. If your mind isn't focused on your ability to grow and be curious and truly see and open to the possibility of positive opportunities in your life, you'll miss out on all of the important connections. The A in magic, in the magic framework, MAGIC, is for accountability. You're in a position that requires skill and comes with a good amount of pressure. And that's where your mindset will be at play here. But you also need accountability. You need to be accountable to your patients, to your team members, and to yourself. Are you aware of what's going on for those around you? Are you aware of the thoughts and self-talk that you have during the day? Are you saying things to yourself that you'd never let anyone else say to you? This is a big concept and so easily dismissed. And in a few minutes, I'll give you my tool for interrupting negative thoughts that creep in. It's so important that you build skills that match with your values. You care about others. So can you check in with them honestly and vulnerably? with all transparency, I'm asking questions here because your subconscious screams the answer. When you ask a question, your subconscious wants to answer yes to everything. And so I'm asking, and we'll begin to look for ways for your subconscious to say yes if you let it. So I'll continue with a couple more questions here. Can you lead by asking for help? Yes. Whether that's for something you're struggling with or with a project you're working on completing and wanting to celebrate, can you reach out to garner support? Being accountable to yourself for living into the values you said you'd have is a big deal. And the next letter in the magic mindset framework is G, MAGIC. G is for gratitude. G's for gratitude. There was a period of my life when I woke up before the sun came up and I grabbed something that was supposed to be breakfast before jumping into my car and heading off to work. And every morning when I'd wake up, I'd start my day by muttering some cuss words. And what we know about mindset is what you feed yourself, you get. And one day was in one of those lovely pre-dawn cuss word starting days. I was in stop and go traffic, hating my life. Stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. And then the traffic went stop, stop. But I went stop, go. And I struck the vehicle in front of me. I rear-ended a trash truck. I didn't need a bigger sign in my life. I hit a garbage truck. Something had to change, and it did. This is a big deal here because I gave myself permission to start paying attention to the things I really did value. I gave myself permission to start to enjoy my life and to step out of a world of supposed to. And I became grateful for the things I had in my life. My morning routine shifted. And while there's a lot more to this story, suffice it to say that now I wake up happy and perky. And according to my wife, I'm annoyingly perky even before anyone's had coffee. So the first words out of my mouth with a great big smile are, thank you. Thank you. I say that out loud as I take a breath of air and stretch. I smile, and then I think about what I get to do each day. It's no longer what do I have to do, but rather whom do I get to serve and how do I serve greatly? I'm grateful each day for the difference I get to make in people's lives, and whether that's via writing or a coaching call or maybe even a smile and eye contact with the checker at the grocery store, I know I'm making a difference. And I'm grateful that I get to do that every day. Do you know what an aglet is? It's that little plastic piece at the end of a shoelace. It stops the shoe from fraying, the shoelace from fraying. I bring that up because it's that little piece of plastic, and I'm grateful for that. And I'd like to encourage you to take on a practice of gratitude for the really small things in your life. Think about 5, 10, 20, 50 things for which you're grateful. And as an exercise, you might want to list them. It is harder than you might think. The point here again is that if you can be grateful for the little things every day, two things happen. First, you find that the little irritants of everyday life just aren't that annoying. And second, when you're grateful for the little things in your life, you find that the big things are pretty significant. And that's where true joy is born. So gratitude really is a thing. The I in the magic framework, mindset, accountability, gratitude. The I is inspiration. What inspires you? And who can you serve to inspire? I'm a big fan of lift as you lead. Lift as you lead. If you're on a path and can bring someone with you, there's no need to compete. There's enough for everyone to succeed. And the question then is, how can you help those around you? How can you serve as a role model and support or encourage others, inspiring others, lifting as you lead? You may not be aware of this, but you are being watched. Whether you're by your family or your friends or your teammates, people are watching who and how you are. Have you Have you ever had a really draining day and then somehow, whether at a grocery store or airport or somewhere during your day, you found yourself standing next to somebody who's in the military? Their posture is something. When my daughter was in the Marines, I'll tell you that I found myself standing a little taller around her. She probably didn't know that she was inspiring me. It's that subtle. And think about that. Your intention, your posture, your actions, your tone, and the language you use, all of those serve as tools of inspiration. Do you think you could inspire someone to be just that bit better because you're choosing to live your life just that bit better? You're choosing to step up. By the way, I use doorways as a reminder. It's called a threshold trigger. Whenever I cross over a threshold, I do a mental check. What do the people on the other side of this door need? How could I serve them? It's amazing because if you do that, every single patient gets your absolute best. And better still, when you get home, you won't feel like you left it all at the office. You'll be in a state of wanting to continue to lift others. I is for inspiration, and you can remind yourself to bring it. C is for clarity, and it comes back to your values. You've got to be super clear about what you value now, not what you did value, not what you're supposed to value. Just get really clear about what you do value. For most people, it's time and money that give them the freedom to spend with family and loved ones, maybe to enjoy new adventures. You might have a hobby or an interest you've put aside, and remember that someday thing. It's not in your calendar, you have now. So what is it you value? What would you truly treasure? What would you want more of in your life? And that then begs the question about what other things you've been tolerating in your life. What have you been putting up with, whether that's clutter, a toxic relationship, or your nutrition or exercise routine, or even negative self-talk? What have you allowed in your life that no longer belongs? You might need to stop being distracted by your phone or email. You might need to become just a little more present with the people around you. Getting super clear on your values and taking even small action steps toward living into those values just a little bit more each day, that'll serve you in ways you haven't imagined. Let people see what you value through your actions and your words. Get clear for yourself so you know what's in and what's out, and what you will and what we will no longer tolerate. Become really, really clear about what you value and how you stand in those values. Clarity is how you communicate what you value as well. The magic framework will serve you. This is the magic mindset. Mindset, accountability, gratitude, inspiration, and clarity. That's true magic. Now we're focusing here on mindset, which will lead us to mindfulness, and that's the foundation for great self-care, all of which are essential for mental health. Remember that health is not merely the absence of disease. Per the World Health Organization, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And we humans, we're not meant to just survive. Animals in the forest were meant to survive. Squirrels, bears, birds, lizards, they don't wake up every day thinking, how can I live my best life today? They're going to do their squirrel, bear, bird, or lizard thing same day, day after day, same thing day after day. They follow the seasons, certainly, but that's what they do. We have a different level of intellect, and we have a consciousness around choice. It's when we lose sight of that that we begin to feel the world closing in on us. Depression can set in when we feel like we don't have a way out. Martin Seligman is a psychologist who became famous in the 1960s for his work on that. As we look back on his work now, his early work, it seems a little cruel. He experimented with dogs in a kennel. He'd have a dog in a space with a bench and a grid on the floor that could administer an electric shock. In a nutshell, his experiments were that he'd sound a buzzer, and then a couple seconds later, he'd send a current through the grid on the floor. And the dogs learned that when the buzzer sounded, a shock was coming. At first, they were confused, but they soon learned that to avoid the shock, they needed to jump up on the bench. The buzzer sounded, the dog would jump on the bench. The buzzer sounded, the dog would jump on the bench. The buzzer sounded, and the dog would jump on the bench. What came next was the hard and kind of cruel part. Seligman had the bench removed. The buzzer would sound, and the dog would look around frantically, searching for the bench, and the shock would come. A buzzer would sound, and the dog would run or hop, looking for the bench, and the shock would come. And then eventually, the dogs realized that without the bench, the shock was coming. And the buzzer would sound, and the dogs would just lay down. Without the sense of escape or any way out, the dogs just laid down and took it. This research is what made Seligman famous. And the concept here is what's known as learned helplessness. Learned helplessness. When we feel like there's no way out, we begin to tell ourselves stories like maybe we've done something to deserve it and maybe no alternative exists. If there doesn't seem to be a way out, maybe we might as well take it. I think we can all think of someone in our lives at one point or other who's lived that way. They feel a little caged. They feel like there's no way out, and they feel like maybe even they deserve it. And this is so anti the magic framework. It's why I introduced that first. Learned helplessness is what it says. It is a learned way to be. And luckily, by the 1980s, Seligman realized that if dogs and people could learn to live their lives from a place of helplessness, the other opposite just must be true as well. And he began doing a variety of experiments and was able to show that if you interrupt negative thought patterns, if you engage in gratitude and charity, if you look for the positive, you can train yourself to look for alternatives in your world. And with that, the world of positive psychology was born. We can learn to live our lives in a way that's meaningful, focused, and purpose-driven. We're beyond just needing to survive. As humans, if we're not thriving, we're in a state of disease. Again, you need to hear this. As humans, if we're not thriving, we're living in a state of dis-ease. Our mindset matters. The mindset of those around us matters. Our accountability to ourselves and to others is paramount. Living gratitude, living that way, it's a choice that serves to elevate. Being deliberately inspirational keeps you present and focused on others. And being clear, having that clarity about your values and your boundaries, that allows you to accept in only the things that truly matter. Thriving is your normal set point. How would your life be different if you took that concept on fully? Thriving is your normal set point. You don't have to tolerate surviving and never ever say, oh, living the dream, when someone asks you how you're doing. You don't get points for suffering. Overall health starts with mental health, and that's all about mindfulness and self-care. Listen to the words you use with yourself. Would you let someone else talk to you or your mother the way you talk to yourself? You know, if you're doing well here, pass that on. That's awesome. If you're realizing that you've been beating up on yourself, caging yourself, and maybe even teaching yourself that there's no way out, it's time to change and even reach out for help. By the way, that one tool I use to interrupt negative thoughts that try and sneak in, I say reset out loud. Doubt edges up. Reset. It's a handy, quick thought pattern interrupt. It makes me smile. And I remind myself that just as much as there might be some doubt, there's also the likelihood of success. And that's what I reset to. We choose to better ourselves so that we can be better for others. We choose to lift as we lead, and we step into the role of leadership, no matter the position we have at work or in our family. What stops us? What gets in the way of asking for help or even seeing someone else that might need some help? It's something that Jerome Adams, the former Surgeon General, said is bad. It's really bad. And in a word, that's stigma. We need to be talking about how we're doing. We need to see what's real and not judge ourselves against someone else's highlight reel on social media. And we need to be seeing each other. Your mindset has to be so attuned to possibilities that you see others who could use your unique gift, that of being a kind, present, compassionate human. Dr. Adams said that stigma kills more people than cigarettes, heroin, or any other risk factor. Why? Because stigma stops people from connecting. We need to identify stigma and talk about it in order to overcome it. There are 3 types of stigma. There's self-stigma, where we internalize and accept negative stereotypes, essentially taking on the notion of being broken, therefore maybe bad, wrong, or unworthy. There's social or public stigma, where a general negative feeling about a group exists. Those who are mentally ill or addicted are, you could fill in the blank. It results in people choosing not to access care and essentially suffering alone. And then there's structural stigma, where our workplaces or organizations actually make it difficult to access care. Well, the CDA is changing that, and we'll talk about resources on and after our panels. You're here to build awareness about how to build your life, living into who you deserve to be, and in doing so, giving greater care of and to yourself. It's in this way that we create connections with others. What does it take to build a culture of caring? It's here that we each stop being one of the anonymous we who believe something should be done, and become an accountable I who steps in to become aware and take action where needed. Connections with others is about being deliberate and seeing them. We blow into work and get right to it, and we could pause. What does it take to say, I see you, dear human, I see you? Think about the last conversation you had with someone. What color were their eyes? It only takes 2 seconds or less to have eye contact. It only takes a moment of being deliberate to connect and build a culture of caring, and that starts with one. A culture of caring comes from and through your values. It's demonstrated in your actions, in how you pause to connect with each other, how you listen, and how you hold space for another. Sometimes a sacred second, a pause, it's all that's needed. I see you, dear human. Use the mindset magic framework for yourself. Mindset, accountability, gratitude, inspiration, and clarity. Interrupt old patterns that no longer serve you, and become truly deliberate in the way you choose to see others in your world. You might just save a life by creating and living into a culture of caring. I see you, dear human. I see you. That's magic. I'm Dr. Wayne Purnell. Thank you. At this time, I would like to take us to our panel. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Roberta Garceau and Dr. Matthew Korn. They'll be joining us for the next segment of our program, a panel discussion about looking inward and tools you can use to prioritize mental health and wellness. I could see Dr. Matt. All right. I can't see Dr. Garceau, but I'm pretty sure she's there. I'm going to introduce them. Dr. Roberta Garceau, not only is she a practicing dentist, she's also a wellness advocate. Roberta blends current science with traditional or Ayurvedic wisdom to help others enhance health, function, and self-esteem, and overall well-being. Dr. Matthew Korn is a periodontist practicing in Sacramento, California, and he's a recovering addict with over 13 years of sobriety. His relationship with addiction makes him uniquely qualified as the CDA Wellness Committee Chair, and he, as he likes to say, his mess has become his ministry. As we get rolling, there's some statistics that are worthy of paying attention to. Prior to the pandemic, we saw stats showing that 25% of Americans had some form of mental health or substance use issue. 25%. That's 1 out of every 4 people. Now, the recent statistics are staggering, as that number has doubled, and now 50%, or 1 out of every 2 people, has experienced or is currently experiencing some form of mental health or substance use issue. Whether anxiety, depression, or something else, either we've experienced it or we know someone who has. And that means 100% of the population has been touched by this issue in some way. I would encourage you to build vision statements that allow your practices to reflect a culture of caring. And as you'll hear in many ways during our time together, you can't give what you don't have. And that means you have to grow in what you know. And it means that you've got to take care of yourself so that you can actually care for others. Again, a culture of caring has to start with self-care. With that, let's jump into the panel with Doctors Roberta Garceau and Matt Korn. Matt, good to see you. Your story is one of addiction and recovery. How do you manage stress now as a recovering addict?
Well, thank you for asking, Dr. P. And I want to also thank the CDA for inviting me to this forum and giving me the opportunity to tell a little bit of my story. The short answer to your question is much differently than I used to. First, a little bit of background. I grew up in what I now know was a pretty dysfunctional family, although at the time it seemed totally normal to me. But I learned how to handle stress from what I saw as a kid growing up, which meant typically you argued about things, typically you blamed other people for things. And I went off into dental school and became a dentist and found eventually those things didn't work so well. So the best way to describe the family I grew up in was it was like the Rolling Stones tune, Mother's Little Helper. Mom would take a little Xanax when she wasn't, handling the kids all that well. And guess what? That's what kids see parents do, so that's what we learn to do. So now, thankfully, in recovery, I learned that I am not my behavior. And I didn't need to change who I was. I only needed to change my behavior. And so I only had to really change one thing, and that was everything. And at first, that sounds like a lot. It sounds like trying to eat an elephant. But then I learned that I only needed to do it one bite at a time, and time takes care of the rest. So basically, as a kid, I was focused on getting drugs. High school, all the way into dental school, I wanted, some part of my day was focused on that. And now it's much different. All I can say is that the recovery process has taught me how to take care of myself first, so that, as you say, there's more of me to give to others. And that whole process of taking care of myself and helping others is the best medicine I can take on a daily basis. So every day I wake up every morning, this is my routine. My eyes open, I take a breath, and I put my feet on the floor. And I say to myself, that's 3 miracles by 6 a.m. Somewhere in the morning, I'm either on Zoom or attending in person now, because they're open again, my men's group, which is an AA meeting. And these men are my mentors. They are the people that teach me. They keep an eye on me, first of all. They help me with my thinking that isn't so great all the time. But they teach me that I'm an amazing human being, and I can go out into my world after 6:30 a.m. and be a contribution and make a contribution. So I'm also really careful about what I put into my body through my eyes and my ears, not just my mouth, because there are a lot of messages coming my way. And if I don't have a filter, I can start to take some of that on. And today I find some of the messaging to be pretty agitating. So I just turn the TV off. I do like to be entertained, so I record some things. I fast forward through the commercials, that sort of thing. And then I find ways to nurture myself. Like gardening is meditation for me. And when I exercise, I love to cycle. I call it cyclotherapy. I've learned that every time I exercise, my brain produces this beautiful chemical, brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it helps me create new axons and new synaptic connections. So my brain is rewiring due to the fact that I exercise. I limit caffeine. I do take some vitamin I because you guys know that is ibuprofen. Because, I'm 61 years old now and things just don't work the way they did when I was 18. So that's kind of my day.
That's awesome. I love the notion about, it goes back to what will you tolerate? What do you tolerate in your life, right? What do we let in? What filters do we have? That's fantastic, Matt. Thank you. Roberta, similar question. What techniques do you use for self-care? Hang on, Roberta. I'm not sure if everybody else is hearing that. We've got some sound issues. Is it possible it's your pods that aren't charged still? Have they gone out?
No, I actually charged them while you were talking.
I just want to double check. Is it just me that's hearing that, or Matt, are you hearing it the same way?
I'm hearing that too, yeah.
Okay. So Megan is giving you some. This is live, you guys. This is what happens. So Megan in the background is saying disconnect and reconnect your AirPods. Let's just see if we can get a connection. This is how it works. We got good people on our panel and occasional tech stuff that just makes it glitchy. It's okay. And Roberta's message is so important. We want to make sure that we can hear her. Cool. So Megan is suggesting you check your audio source. Meaning, does it show that AirPods are the ones connected? You sounded good before we went live, so I'm not sure what happened. It's nice to see you both. Let me ask Matt another question while we're doing that, okay? So, Matt, I know that battling with addiction itself, it's not easy to do alone. How did you find the courage to ask for help?
That is a great question. I would love to tell you I had the courage to ask for help, but that wasn't my case. I love what you said earlier about our inner voices and the way we hear ourselves and talk to ourselves. Trust me, there were several times I wanted to ask for help, but it could never come out because that part of me was broken at the time. The shame that was built up in me was too much for me to get out from underneath. So my intervention, if you will, revolved around an employee coming to a coach I was working with, and that coach did something that really mattered. Most people can tell someone they have a problem. Usually they get pretty angry and they say something. But what worked for me was my coach asked me if I thought I needed help. And the way it was soft and it was a question, I actually could get it out. But not before the state board ended up in my office. They're law enforcement officers. They have guns and badges. And that was a scary proposition that I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through. That's
Yes.
why I do what I do, because there's an alternative to waiting till the bitter end when help comes to find you. But the bottom line is, help did come to find me. It was just the right thing for me. Thankfully, I could surrender at that point, and the rest is the miracle. So
that is a miracle. Every day a miracle. And with, we each get to start with miracles every morning. Roberta.
Can you hear me now?
Let's hear. Oh my goodness. Another
Yay!
miracle. That's awesome. The miracle of technology. This is awesome. So look, frustrations happen. Let me start back with the question I had wanted to ask you, which is what techniques you use for self-care.
Well, there was one that you might have just seen. I did this. Like exhale, right? So, yes, as I was trying to say, to me, self-care is a very proactive endeavor. I used to think that that self-care was selfish. And so like a true martyr, I put everyone else's needs before my own. And it worked great until it didn't. And I needed emergency surgery because I had internal bleeding and my body literally imploded, right? So not so good. Now I ask myself the number one self-care question, which is, what do I need right now? I mean, really ask that question of yourself multiple times a day. And it requires a level of self-awareness. So hopefully through the panel and through some exercises today, that will be some techniques that folks can use to tune into their own selves. Once you know what you need, try to find it, right, in a healthful way. So, my personal self-care techniques include, I wake up before the sun. I wake up usually 5:15, 5:30 in the morning so that I have time to meditate and breathe and do some yoga stretches and then journal. And so in this way, I am getting my body, my mind, and my spirit, or energy, if you will, intentional, focused, and ready for the day, for whatever happens, right? So a lot of intentionality with that. Then say it's a work day. Once I'm at work, I do take breaks, right? Give yourself a mask break these days. Oh my goodness. Go to the bathroom, get a drink of water. I had a patient come in recently, a young man, and went into a full-on panic attack. I'm like, oh my goodness. So when that happens, not only can you help your patient by breathing, but you can help yourself with mindful breathing. And I'll be leading a bit of an exercise and a really simple technique that we can all use a little later in the program. Stretch during the day. That's another self-care thing. Get up and move. If you've been sitting here for the program the whole time, you might want to get up and just stretch right now, right? But for the viewers. Stretch in your operatory, stretch with your assistant. There you go. Stretch with your patients. Take time for that. I do try to eat mostly organic, local, fresh foods and seasonal foods as much as possible. Do I eat the random donut? Of course. I'm not a purist here. I live in the same world that you folks live in. But as Dr. Korn said, he tries to put healthy things in, right? So I do try to eat that and drink lots of water. Lunchtime. Yes, there is a lunch break, right? You cannot, stuff happens, right? But you cannot work through lunch day after day after day. I tried it. It doesn't work. It just really doesn't work well. So make sure you have a lunch break. And even if it's 10 minutes, do not check your emails, your stocks, your social media. Like, eat mindfully for 10 minutes. I will sit in my office because it's quiet and I have a window. I'll put my feet up on the windowsill and just look outside. Just be with your food, just be in a moment. And then try to get some movement. Again, it's not possible. It doesn't happen every day. But even if you can get outside 5-10 minutes, walk around the block, give yourself some space to clear your head. These are all little tiny self-care techniques that you can do. They don't cost anything and they're available. By the evening, I like to reconnect with family or friends over a healthy meal. And then at nighttime, I do a little self massage with oils, organic food grade oil. Doesn't have to be fancy. You got coconut oil at your grocery store, sesame oil, anything like that. And just give a little self massage. It helps with joint lubrication, helps with your skin, helps to ease your muscles right before your shower. And then I have a little herbal tea. And unwind with a book or something, look like a little mental floss tea here. So that can help to unwind at the end of the day. So lots of little things. And Wayne, I'm curious though, what do you see as you're working with dental leaders, and how do you coach them for better mental awareness and self-care?
That is a great question. I wanted to comment on a few things. Let me hold that for a second. Breathing is huge. Being intentional is huge. I wanted to underscore the things. I have been taking notes, and I'm hoping that our audience is taking notes as well as you sit there. Absorb it however you absorb this information. There are gems that are dropping right and left here, so please take it in. Breathing, being intentional, being focused. Staring out your back window is huge. I worked with an executive. One of the things he did was what he called rabbit time. He'd set a timer for like 3 minutes. He'd turn his chair around and stare out the window at an empty field. And he called it rabbit time because he'd watch the rabbits hopping in the field. It is huge. And then there's research I'm traveling, and I brought tons of research with me. There's even recent research as recent as last week that talks about the importance of getting outside and how that affects not only your mindset, but also, I mean, your whole body. Mm-hmm. So it's huge. Now, when I work with leaders, I work with leaders across an array of organizations. And as I noted in my speech, I always start with mindset and gratitude. I always start there, right? So, and as you know, I guide people through exploring 5 key areas of high performance. And the first one is clarity. You've got to get really clear. While I end my magic mindset with the C of being of clarity, the first place that I start is there. Like, you've got to be really clear on what you value. You've got to be able to define what's in and what's out. If you're not focused on your filter, you're going to let things in that aren't your priorities. And we all have competing priorities. And just because something is important doesn't mean it's important now, right? I mean, one of the things I talk about is like a picnic basket. You know, if you look around in the world, you could choose a hairdryer or a jackhammer or a bread knife. And if you're going on a picnic, most picnics are going to choose the bread knife and not the hairdryer or the jackhammer. Most picnics. I've had people tell me that occasionally a jackhammer would be helpful. But really, it's about, these are important items, but they're not important now. And you have to define what's really important for you. So what will you tolerate and what you won't, and who do you want to become? And that's a huge foundation for mental health and wellness, right? So the other areas where I work with high performance and in my dynamic leader program is energy or vitality. Now, for a couple of us across the country, it's late at night. And we could go, oh, it's late. You know, I gave so much today. And it's like, no, it's time to still be present. It's time to still be present. And when you're done with your day at the end of your workday, it's time to still be present. And that's where I use the threshold trigger that I talked about before, right? You've got to be able to manage your energy and manage the fuel that you give it. And that's where both Roberta, you and Matt have talked about, be careful about and be mindful about what you put in your bodies. So courage is another place where I work with leaders, right? Stepping up and stepping in to do that stuff you've been putting off. And it is courage to even say, yeah, you're right. I probably could accept help. I probably might need some help. That's courage. It's a huge act. Productivity means cramming more time in your day, actually more things in your day, because you're managing those things. We all have 24 hours, and there's always these pulls and distractions. So it gets back to, what will you tolerate and what will you not? And so being able to be productive and focused is really important. And then getting the support you need is being able to ask for support and being able to get that support. That's influence. And so those are really the 5 areas. Asking for what you need is done without apology. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to bug you, but I could really use. It's like, no, it's your life. You are stepping up and stepping into being a better version of you every day. You have to. You owe it to the people around you to be that bit better every day. And that means you step in unapologetically. Sorry for being bigger. I didn't accidentally mean to lead you. You've got to choose to lead. You've got to choose to step up. And so that's really, in a nutshell, I think I'm hoping that answers the question about self-care. Let me swing back to Matt for a second. What do you think is important for others to know about your recovery process? You're muted.
I did it. All right.
It's so much better when we can hear your gems of wisdom.
Thank you. There are 3 things, really. First of all, I'm going to answer this question by addressing people who either may be struggling with some kind of a substance use issue or know somebody that is. Remember, it turns out I was the last guy to find out I had a problem. Everybody else knew, but couldn't step up. So here's the thing that I want everybody to hear. Number 1, I was in a hopeless state when I was under the influence, and I couldn't stop. What I learned is there's hope. 85% of dentists that I know of that I've helped with in the last 13 years are still recovering. 100% of them have a better life, not than they had before, but a better life than they thought imaginable. Now that's hope. And the last thing is that addiction isn't the disease that only affected me. It affected my entire family. Heck, it started in my family of origin, and it came down the generations to me. And then I shared it with my family. Every single person in my family took on an adaptive role to deal with me. So me getting help and getting healthy was the influence on the entire family that they needed to do some work. I think of my son, who's 23. He went through a family program as I went through the Betty Ford Center, and he became a dear friend of the man who's a miracle, who teaches kids about addiction. They still stay in touch. He has so much recovery knowledge. I'd like to think that's sort of insurance for him in his future. There's no guarantees, of course, but what I see happen in my family, I just celebrated a alcohol-free Thanksgiving. That never happened in my family 13 years ago. So all these miracles are waiting. It's like eating the elephant. It doesn't happen all in one day. So that's what I think people need to know.
That's huge. Yeah, it's huge. Thank you. I'm going to underscore some of the stuff you said. The idea that people could live a life that was unimaginable, and to really, really help them imagine, help others imagine the unimaginable. It's like, what would your life be like if? And it's what would your life be like if you had more time, if you had more resources, if you had more availability to yourself? What would your life be like? It's huge. And then, you talked about the adaptive processes of the family, and I wanted to come back to that as well, which is, the family has been likened to any system, whether it's family or team, or any kind of organization, but really here we're talking about the family, has been likened to a mobile, those mobiles that have little dangly things with cross strips, and they hang in balance. And everything moves in balance. And if you move one item down that pole, it starts to shift, and everything else around it must shift. And the adaptive process for someone who's addicted or abusive or otherwise disordered, the whole family unit finds a way to make it stable. And that's sometimes always moving. And that becomes very energy intensive. And so it's one of the reasons that we're having this conversation specifically. With that, Roberta, I use an acronym that I picked up along the way that is HALT. HALT, H-A-L-T. I use that acronym to remind me not to make any major decisions when in the acronym HALT, when I'm hungry, when I'm angry, when I'm lonely, or when I'm tired. HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And if you're listening to this and you hadn't heard that, please write it down. On those days, Roberta, when you might find yourself just that bit little angry, I was going to use another language, angry or frustrated or overwhelmed, what do you do? What are some of the tips that you might offer for how people are feeling that, how they might get through it?
So, of course, I've never felt that way, but I've heard others have, right? Yeah. Anger, frustration, and overwhelm, they are the perfect trifecta for the perfect storm. Those are actually two different imbalances. And so anger and frustration are excess fire. It's when we've been just working too hard, too many hours without a break, without that self-care to restore ourselves, right? And so when I find that happening to me, because it does happen to everyone, I think, okay, what do I need right now? I need to cool down. I need to cool down that fire, right? So that might be physical, right? Take a mask break. If you're not at the office, if you're outdoors, find some shade. In the office, I'll turn on the air conditioning, a fan, or open the window in the cool weather. Just cool down. And then exhale. Again, breathe, right? Exhale and drink some room temperature water. So we might think, oh, I need to drink some ice water to cool down. Actually, no. Your body has to work harder to warm up that ice water so that it can process it and it can work in your system. So just drink some nice room temperature water. And then if it's necessary, I give myself a timeout, right? If I need to remove myself from the situation, right? If I just feel too frustrated, walk away, go to the bathroom and do some mindful breathing. For the most part, no one's going to follow you in there for 2 minutes, right? Go get a drink of water. If it's a bigger thing than that and you need to walk around the block at lunchtime or something, whatever it is, those are some of my tips to cool down. As far as overwhelm, to me, that's a separate animal. Overwhelm is too much movement and too much air and wind. So to slow that down, we've got to slow down, right? To reduce that. So one, I will begin and end my day with a mind dump, right? So that would look like all the things that are contributing to overwhelm, right? It could be environmental. It could be that there's too many emergencies being thrown in the schedule, or there's too much noise, or there's too much visual stimulation. Matt, when you said you sometimes turn off the television for various reasons, or you turn off those commercials, if there's just too much coming at you, slow it down. And really a mind dump can be helpful with that. So it offers relief by releasing all the things that are in your mind on your to-do list and all the swirly monkey mind. So once I've written it down, I know, okay, I can kind of let that go. I can see it on the paper. So there's the relief. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, there's some clarity to this because I have a better visualization of it. I see the pieces. And okay, now that I see it, I can prioritize things. Like all these to-dos, and maybe it's an errand or maybe it's a task, and it's like, yeah, I don't have to do that today. Or maybe I can delegate that, or I can ask for help with that, or it's not really important, or I can, okay, I see a time later this week that will work out better for me. So a mind dump, again, the beginning of the day to set out your intentions for the day, and the end of the day to get that stuff out so you don't have what we call in yoga and Ayurveda, the monkey brain, right? That monkey mind that just doesn't stop. It's like that little monkey that was, doing the music machine, just going and going and going and not stopping. Yeah, that too, right? We all know the monkeys. Dr. P, you love monkeys. So I did allude to the other thing is breathing, right? Breathe, get some relaxing music. I do that at the office. There happens to be a channel on a subscription music station that begins with a P, and it is relaxing, gentle office music. Like, okay, they have a channel for this, and it's wonderful instrumental music. So if you don't subscribe to that, I don't know who this gentleman is, but Ryan Stewart piano music. It's a nice thing. It doesn't put you to sleep, but it's nice and calm. Like, look up stuff that will help you and help your patients. And then lastly, as I did mention, and as Dr. P mentioned and Matt, ask for and accept help. A lot of us go into dentistry because we want to be our own bosses, and we're that kind of personality. We may be task or goal-driven people. It's okay to ask for help, and it's necessary. So asking for and accepting help is the other way to help deal with the overwhelm.
That's huge. Thank you. That's great. Years ago, some of you know, I was a martial artist, and I would teach self-defense. And it is a common practice when you're startled to go, right? It's like, it's a fear response. And the first thing that you started with, when I asked you this question, the first thing you started with, Roberta, was to say, exhale. Right. And so in self-defense, I taught people how to roar, like roar, roar. Right. And if you roar, if you exhale fully, your body says, I must inhale. Right.
Exactly.
And then your body goes. But if you inhale, you could hold your breath and hold yourself in this state of tension. And that's pretty horrible. Right. So that's tough stuff.
Yeah, that's why when
the other thing, right? Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that when I help patients or myself, especially when I help patients though, I tell them first, exhale completely. So when you're trying to help your patients, squeeze the stale air out of your belly, squeeze that belly button towards your spine, because then they can breathe. Otherwise it's like, they're trying to breathe. It's like, no, you breathe out first, and then your body will do the rest. Let it come in.
That's so important, right? To begin listening again to your body. And the other thing you said about writing stuff down allows you to not be spinning and putting energy into trying to track all the details and just being present for yourself. And I think that's so important as well. Matt, I'm gonna come back to you. We talked about the idea of building a culture of caring, building a culture through vision and through values, through expressing that, where you can actually embody that every day. And so I know that your values are so strong, they must come through in your actions. And you are building a culture of caring focus for your team and your practice. Can you talk about that? What does it look like for you? And how does that support your mental health and mental health in general? Building a culture of caring.
And we have all day to answer this question, correct? This is an 8-hour topic for me. So let me see if I can distill it down into about 3 minutes. First of all, I love people. That's just the way I'm built. It wasn't always that way, but that's who I've become. So when people interview to work in my office, the first thing I do is I do a Gallup strengths assessment. I've done that myself. I've known my top 5 strengths for over 20 years. And the minute I hear their top 5 strengths, I know them at a much deeper level just in the first few minutes. I also have an unlimited CE policy. The good dentists go to CE, great dentists bring their teams, exceptional dentists send their teams and stay home. So those are things that I just start with. Patrick Lencioni is a great business author. I just trust everything he writes, even though it doesn't make sense. And one of those things was a trust building exercise I do on the first day of employment with every employee. We get together as a team, even for just 30 minutes. And the question is, tell us about your childhood. Now, that's a really scary question. So I go first and I tell the story I've already told you guys. I grew up in a crummy family that taught me some things that didn't work for me. And by the way, I'm in recovery and I run a program for the CDA to help dentists who are struggling with substances. That gets it right out there because everybody needs to know I got 2 jobs. And what comes next is the miracle. If you're the new guy, you go last. But the people that have been there a while have done this several times. You should hear their stories evolve over time. It is so beautiful as they get to know themselves better over time, and they're trusting the team with more information incrementally every time we do it. So that's a big one. I don't know what I'd do without that one. Shifting over to patient care, I do a couple of things. Every new patient I say, let me tell you how much I value my team. And because I do that, I never hear a patient abuse my team. It used to happen all the time. It frustrated me. I didn't know how to stop it. Well, guess what? I only had to change me. Once again, there's that principle, change me. Every new patient, I do a preclinical interview. I need to know who I'm treating. I can't dehumanize them the way I used to, the way I did in dental school. I was taught that teeth needed to be fixed, so I fixed teeth. They came down conveyor lines, I fixed them, off they went. I am so connected to people now that I need to know who they are because that affects their treatment plan. Rule number 1, we're not going to hurt each other. Rule number 2, if we hurt each other, see rule 1. Those things keep me on track. And then the other thing is I want to power share with my patients. I want them to make the decisions, not me. I can show them the menu, but only they can choose. And it's my job to help them understand the pros and cons of their choices. So the way it helps me is that positive energy that infuses my team, I think, is love energy. Love isn't a feeling, it's energy. And if we're giving it away, we're getting it back as well. And it also makes it real easy to figure out when fear is popping up and trying to take over. And from time to time, I do have to set an employee free. That's what I call it. I don't call it terminating. I don't call it firing. I set them free because this isn't the right place for them. I wish everybody could find a home there, but that's unfortunately not the reality. So that's sort of a baseline for the systems I use intentionally every day.
It's huge. It's huge. The number one most empowering thing that any of us have, it sets us apart, and that is choice, right? So the ability to choose, right? A tree grows because it's genetically planned to do that, right? It grows from a little seed. We, as humans, have the ability to choose, and we're the only animal, we're the only living thing that can choose to stop. And it's an amazing thing when you recognize that choice is so powerful. So what you were saying about, having a choice, giving a choice, empowering your patients to have a choice, I'm underscoring and applauding that, because that is where the truth lies. And love is where the truth lies. And we need to be having more conversations about what that looks like as we engage with each other as humans. I love all of this conversation. This is fabulous. And it's great to hear you to hear you talk about it, Matt. So thank you. Roberta, back to you for a second. Earlier, you had talked about your mindfulness practice, and you have a background in Ayurveda that seems just sort of like this concept that's almost out of reach. So can you talk a little bit about what is Ayurveda? What does it mean? And like how does that apply to wellness?
I sure can. I do hear a little reverb here. Are we okay on the sound?
There's a little echo. I'm going to mute my mic, and Matt, if you can.
All right, that's better, I believe. We're good? Okay, thanks. So in Sanskrit, the word Ayurveda means life wisdom. And it's a thousands of year old tradition of Indian medicine that's still practiced today. It's also known as the sister science to yoga. So they'll hold hands a lot of times. Now, like other alternative forms of medicine, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbalism, one of the beautiful things about yoga and Ayurveda is that they can be practiced in conjunction with or as a complement to Western allopathic medicine. And they also can complement any belief system or lack of belief system. So it's really beautiful. No one's asking you to change your beliefs or to believe something that isn't real for you. What it does offer is Ayurveda offers another lens through which to view life. It's kind of as much a philosophy as it is a science. And in Ayurveda, everything in the world, your physical body, your thoughts, your nerve conduction, the earth, animate and inanimate objects, all of nature are considered to be comprised of the 5 great elements. And that would be earth, water, fire, air or wind, those words are interchangeable, and space. And so through Ayurveda, the goal is to understand your own makeup, right? You can imagine that if you consider those elements as a continuum, earth is the grossest, most dense, heavy, solid, stable of the elements, and then all the way on up through air and space, light and clear and subtle. So knowing your own makeup, having some self-awareness, using the tools that we've been speaking about, gives you the ability to choose proactively things that are in line with your wellness. And then when you invariably get out of sync, Ayurveda offers you tools to get back on track. So for instance, if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, Ayurveda considers that to be excess air, excess movement, excess wind, right? So if that's up here in the subtle range, we need the opposite to balance. So a really main principle of Ayurveda is like increases like, and opposites balance. You got too much wind with stress and overwhelm, we're going to increase the earth element. What the heck is she talking about? Earth in terms of foods. You're going to look for foods that are nurturing and sustaining and building. Maybe that means a warm, healthy stew for lunch instead of a cold, crunchy salad. You might think the salad's good, but that salad is light and crunchy and noisy, and it's everything that you're trying to not be, right? And also activities. You're going to go for activities that are more grounding, meditation, restorative yoga, isometric exercises like hold a plank. It's really strengthening, grounding, supportive, and warming. But you don't want to be taking a Zumba class. There's nothing wrong with Zumba. But if you're stressed or overwhelmed, you're just adding to the frenzy, right? Anything that promotes mindfulness, calm, and ease. That could be reading a book, could be petting a fur baby, knitting, painting, whatever helps you to calm. Those are self-care techniques that Ayurveda would support. There's so much to say. Like Matt said, if we had 8 hours, I could tell you a little bit more. But fortunately, I do have a free masterclass that's on a wellness website that I have, My Yoga Joy. So if you want to look for more on that, there's a free masterclass there about elemental wellness. and to give you a little more tips and insights there.
That's awesome. We have a couple more minutes, and you're going to be walking us through some stuff. Let me ask you one more question. This is all amazing because, right, there's mindset that leads to great mindfulness and being really present, which ultimately is what fuels mental health. If someone's feeling burned out, like we've come through, I don't know if you noticed, but we've come through a thing and we're still in it. There's been this little pandemic thing that's been going around the world, and a lot of people have been sort of mindset messed up over the past couple of years. If someone's feeling burned out, either with their life or in dentistry, what tools do yoga and Ayurveda offer? And we'll just go a couple of minutes and then we'll transition to something you're actually going to show us.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so burnout is exactly what it says. It's when you've been running your fire too hot, burning that candle at both ends just too long, working too many hours or too many days, or just not practicing self-care, right? And so the light in your eyes goes out, the fire in your belly of passion or desire for the things that bring you joy just fizzles, and you're feeling pretty flat. So sometimes the tendency is, well, dang, I'm just going to drink more coffee and do more stuff and move faster. And I'm going to grab more fast food and I'm going to just not sleep and, run on fumes. Of course, we all know that's ridiculous. It doesn't work. And it leads not only to more burnout, but also to physical and mental illness. So Ayurveda would say, you're a tender baby. When your fire is out, you can't just throw more fuel and oil on it. You've got to rekindle it gently. And so that goes back to some of those restorative things I was talking about. Eating nourishing foods, taking mild to moderate exercise. This is not when you're going to train for a marathon. You can't, okay? Getting enough sleep when you're overwhelmed and when you're burnt out. And so if you had a heart attack, you take it a little bit easy because you have to. So recognizing burnout, practicing mindfulness and awareness and self-care are necessary to recover from burnout, as well as to prevent yourself from having a heart attack, right? Look at your daily habits. So one thing is just say no, right? You can't overcommit. No, I will not work through my lunch hour. I'm sorry that the person's having an emergency. It is in my health and interest. I cannot work through another lunch hour today, every day. No, I cannot be on that committee. I will not be on that committee at this time. So saying no. Number two, look at your daily habits in your calendar, as you had said earlier today. Are you scheduling time for a lunch break? Are you scheduling time to exercise? Are you scheduling time to reconnect with your friends or your family? Are you scheduling time for whatever restores you? Right? So putting that in the calendar. And then third, again, ask for and accept help. That definitely can help you to get yourself out of burnout. So just some little shifts, little changes. We're not looking for seismic California weather kind of changes. We're looking for little shifts that can reap really big rewards in terms of your wellness and well-being.
That's pretty fantastic. It's funny, as you were speaking, I've traveled, so I'm out of my time zone. I'm based out of San Francisco. And there was a little notification that popped up from one of my fitness devices that said, bedtime's approaching, start to get ready. It's like, we need to be focused on our sleep and use what tools are available. Stopping tolerating the things that we no longer need to tolerate, calendaring those things that matter. So I will say, Dr. Matthew Korn, Matt, thank you. I really appreciate your being here. The gems that you've offered have been significant. Roberta Garceau, this is going to be amazing. We're going to be learning some easy to do at home and at the office exercises from you at this point. We can all use this about now. So these are things that I'm going to invite the the audience to actually go along and practice this with you. So you're going to as an audience member, allow yourself to participate as Dr. Garceau, as Roberta brings us a few of her other gifts. And Roberta, you are ready for us?
I am so ready.
Awesome. Thank
All
you.
right. So thank you. So welcome to the audience participation portion of this program, right? You are definitely invited to participate. I'm going to be offering 3 different exercises or experiences that can be practiced individually or separately, as well as they can be in tandem, like I'm going to offer them today. You will have access in your resource section to written instructions for these exercises so that you or a team member could lead these for your team at the office or at home. As well, I'll have a video version of this presentation available for free at myogajoy.com. I think that's it. I also have, to accompany this section, some slides of places that are meaningful to me and you might like to look at. For those of you who prefer to view this in full screen, you can find the little upward facing arrow at the bottom of your screen that just click on that and that will bring you to a full screen version for this portion. To get out of that, you can just hit the escape button on your keyboard. So that's an option there as well. Okay. Again, this is intended to be available and safe to just about everybody. That being said, you know yourself the best, and you are responsible ultimately for your well-being. So if there's anything that I offer that is not appropriate for you, please modify or just do what you need to do to take care of yourself. All right. So beginning with guided meditation and centering on the elements. I invite you to, you can do this from lying down. Please don't do that now, you'll fall asleep. From sitting or standing up. If you're standing, you'll want to plant your feet about shoulder width apart, a little wider than your hips, about shoulder width apart. Stand nice and tall. If you're sitting on a chair, scooch forward so that you're on the edge of your seat. You don't want to be slumped over, you're not going to breathe like that. So get to the edge of your seat. If you're sitting on the floor as I am, you may want to sit on a block or a pillow or a cushion just to raise your hips above your knees. That allows blood flow through your hips as well as gives you space. Like if you're sitting like this, it's going to be a little hard to breathe. So giving your torso room to expand. Beautiful. All right. Exhale. And we begin. Go ahead and bring your hands to your hips with the thumbs facing towards your lower back, fingers wrapped around the front of your hips, and just rock side to side. If you're standing, your feet may be doing this a little bit, rubbing on the edges of the feet. Just begin to open the hips. There's a lot of times stories and things that get stored here or kind of get stuck here. And then come to center and give yourself a little massage with your thumbs in that lower back region. Besides the obvious things of, positional things we do with our jobs of leaning over people, lower back pain can indicate stress and anxiety. Those are big places those guys like to hang out. So give yourself a little self-massage. Right? And then again, bring the hands around and begin to rock your hips forward so your tailbone lifts behind you, your belly sways out. And then exhale, lower the tailbone, rock the hips back, and kind of look towards your belly button. Inhale forward, exhale back. So just doing a little rocking, again, lubricating the hips, opening things, releasing a little bit, and getting ready to sit. And then find that place that's neither forward nor back, that central place, and leave yourself be there. Bring the hands to the lap, arms by the side. And the invitation is to soften your gaze. Lower your eyes towards the floor. If it's comfortable, you can close your eyes and go inside for a little introspection, little inward focus. And we begin with the earth element. Feel your feet on the floor, your bottom on the seat, stable, supported, grounded. Notice the weight of your muscles, heavy, smooth, and soft. Bring your awareness to the water element as tears that lubricate your eyes. Swallow some saliva that moisturizes your mouth. Be mindful of synovial fluid that bathes your joints and allows mobility, and cerebrospinal fluid that nourishes and protects your central nervous system. Now bring your attention to that space just above your belly button. Feel the fire of digestion or indigestion or hunger pangs. Scan your body. Notice any areas that are sharp or tingling, anything that's throbbing or warm. And as you exhale, just send a gentle breath there to cool it down. Continue to breathe in through your nose if it's available, feeling the wind element pass through your nasal passages into the small spaces of your lungs. With each exhalation, feeling the air move over your top lip, maybe a little warmer for the journey. Continue to breathe here and notice that as you breathe in, your torso expands into space around you. And as you breathe out, you leave space where you once were. Now just breathe and feel and notice. Notice your heart rate, your breath, the qualities of your mind. Has anything shifted? Is there any more calm or stillness? Maybe there is, and maybe there isn't. Now moving into a 5-second breath. Again, this is intended to be available to just about everybody. If at any time it doesn't feel right for you, just return to your breath exactly as it is right now. So we'll begin together, exhaling completely, squeezing the belly button towards the spine, and then we'll begin. I'll count out loud. Inhale 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,004, 1,005. Exhale 1, 1,000, 2, 1,003, 1,004, 1,005. Breathe in 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale. Exhale. And in and out. Continue to breathe this way on your own, noticing the rhythmicity of your breath. If there are any edges that feel sharp or rough, see if you can iron them out. Make your breath as smooth and silky as possible. Complete another 1 or 2 breath cycles here. And the next time you exhale, just return to your natural breath. Keep that inward focus. And again, check in with yourself. Is there any more ease around your eyes or your jaw or your shoulders. How has your breath shifted? Now, if your eyes have been closed, let them gently flutter open, still keeping things soft. And we'll take this breath into mindful movement. So beginning together, bringing the hands to heart center. Inhale, extend the arms out in front of you, palms facing up, elbows towards each other. Hands are cupped. Exhale, elbows bend. Bring the fingertips to the forehead. Cup the hands over the eyes. Breathing in, draw the palms together, then the thumbs. Begin to lift the arms up overhead as the backs of the hands come together. Left hand comes to the right wrist. Exhale to the left. Inhale, stretch it all the way up towards the ceiling. Tall mountain, switch the clasp of your hands. Exhale, opposite side. Breathing in, reach all the way up, tall mountain. Breathing out, turn to your left. Open the arms out to the horizon as you exhale, bringing the right hand to the left hip, left hand behind you in a twist. Breathing in, unwind from the twist, bring the arms front and center up overhead. Turn to the other side, breathe out, open the arms to the horizon, left hand to right hip, right hand behind you as you gaze over your right shoulder. Inhale, unwind from the twist, arms up overhead, fingers interlace. Exhale, palms towards the ceiling, round the back, gaze comes towards the belly button, feeling a stretch in the back of your heart. Breathing in, release the fingers, breaststroke it open. Begin to flex your back, arch your back, lift your chest, chin, and gaze as your fingers interlace behind you. Exhale, draw the shoulders down and back. Open the heart, open the collarbones. Breathing in, draw the shoulders up towards the ears, fingers interlace. Breathing out, press the palms down, shoulders release. Take a stretch to either side of the neck. Ooh. One more time. Inhale, extend the arms out in front of you, palms facing up at the horizon. Exhale, elbows bend, bring the fingertips to the forehead, cup the hands over the eyes. Breathing in, palms come together, then the thumbs begin to raise the arms up overhead, backs of the hands together, left hand to right wrist. Exhale, stretch the wrist, armpit, and side ribs all the way over. Beautiful. Inhale, raise it all the way up. Exhale, switch the clasp of your hands. Bring it on over to the opposite side. See if you can feel it down into the hip or side waist. Inhale, draw it all the way up overhead. Exhale, turn to the left, arms open to the horizon, right hand to left hip, left hand behind you in a twist. Breathing in, unwind from the twist, bring it all front and center up overhead. Breathing out, turn the opposite way, arms at the horizon, left hand to right hip, right hand behind you. Inhale, unwind from the twist, arms come up overhead, fingers interlace. Exhale, flip the palms up, round the back, gaze towards your belly button, feeling the back of the heart open. Breathing in, release the fingers, breaststroke it open, hands interlace behind you as you lift your chest, chin, and gaze. Exhale, draw the shoulders down and back. Breathing in, shrug the shoulders all the way up to the ears, fingers interlace. Breathing out, press the palms down, release the shoulders, stretch one side and then the other of the neck. And just bring your hands to your lap. Go ahead and close the eyes or lower the gaze. Just go inside for a few more moments. And just notice what may have shifted for you. Do you feel a sense of calm, perhaps? Little tingling, blood flowing, little energy. Maybe more space between your shoulders, more space to breathe. So practices like this are wonderful for self-care, for self-awareness. And you can do them for free anytime, any place. Doesn't need any special equipment, right? Self-care is not selfish. It's absolutely essential to your well-being. And it's necessary for us to be present, aware, and caring of others. So on that note, I'd like to welcome back Dr. Ronnie Brown. Ronnie is going to be speaking to us to help us understand what we can do to recognize crisis in others and how we can support one another. Ronnie?
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you for that mindfulness exercise. One of the most important things that we can do as dental professionals is to, reflect back on those moments when we knew that we weren't okay and we didn't necessarily know what to say or, what to do. But I think by reflecting back on those moments, it really does help create a dialogue. It provides us with an opportunity for us to, learn and grow from those opportunities so that next time one of those moments occurs, we can address it more skillfully as well as more confidently. So with that, I would like to introduce to our panel, Jocelyn Coupel, and I hope I can see her video coming up. But Jocelyn Coupel is a former senior trial prosecutor. She is a domestic violence expert. She's a speaker, she's an educator who delivers innovative and impactful training across the country to address issues of domestic violence. For the past 2 decades, Jocelyn has prosecuted high-risk domestic violence cases. And her passion for domestic violence, if you will, really was ignited during her first year as a senior trial prosecutor, where in her native country, Canada, it witnessed the worst multiple domestic violence homicide that country had ever experienced. Unfortunately, earlier this year, one of our own dental colleagues, Serena, who worked for Dr. Bell, lost her life to domestic homicide. Jocelyn had the opportunity to speak to Dr. Bell and his team as they mourned the loss of their teammate, Serena, to domestic violence. Jocelyn will point out, what she heard and what they share with her in terms of what they saw, what they heard during the final weeks, during the final days of Serena's life. And she'll share those reflections from the team, really from an informed perspective, and will point out the potential significance of those observations. So with that, Jocelyn, it's great to see you, and I welcome you to our panel conversation.
Oh, thank you, Ronnie, for your very kind introduction. As you have suggested, and I agree, I'm here today because of Serena, really, and because of her story. And it's a story that is a very common story to me. It's a story that I've heard hundreds of times in the course of my career, but it's not so familiar to our audience. Mm-hmm. So before we really get into the larger conversation, I want to introduce you a little bit to Serena. She was a long-time valued general dental assistant in Dr. Bell's practice, as you've mentioned. She married her husband, Eric, in January of this year. And 6 months later, Eric murdered her by strangling her to death. And that occurred when she told him that she was leaving him. So I want the audience to think about that, that singular fact. Mm-hmm. In the few months leading up to her murder, there were a lot of signs that all was not well with her marriage, and that Eric was actually pretty obsessive, jealous, controlling man. Serena never really spelled out exactly what was happening. But she wasn't completely silent either. There were many signs from which from an informed point of view would have been recognized or realized to be significant by both Serena herself and by her team members, frankly. So, for example, when her colleagues saw Serena's bruised throat and neck, they knew that something wasn't right. They asked her about it. and asked her what happened. And her reply was, somewhat flippant, according to what I was told, namely that Eric had, quote, choked her a little bit during sex. So, that's kind of a hard thing, to like go on from. So her colleagues kind of accepted her excuse, as I think most of us would. I mean, what else are you going to say? And they didn't speak about it further with Serena, because she kind of shut the door, at least as far as they were concerned. So today my goal is to give a voice to what Serena, and I think all victims of domestic violence, want from all of us, from our colleagues, from our community, from our friends, and from our family. And here's what I think we need to know. We need to be educated about the dynamics of domestic violence. We need to be able to identify the signs of domestic abuse within, the context that we're in. We need to start a conversation. And this is probably one of the most important points. We need to ask a person what is really happening, what is really going on. We need to be compassionate, and we need to be without judgment. Like you can't, you have to be essentially suspend your judgment and just be compassionate. And honestly, we need to make it our business, both individually and collectively, to find out what the resources are in our own communities so that we can provide referrals. So, and we're going to talk about that through our conversation today a lot more. But before we continue with that conversation, Ronnie, I want our audience to know a little bit more about you. We've heard some things about you, but you're too modest to tell the audience that you are, in fact, a renowned expert on substance use disorders. This is an expertise which you talked about your work over the last 2.5 decades. So it's certainly experience born of clinical practice, but also research. And you're also a published author who wrote a book called A State of Decay. And that particular book actually walks dental practitioners through recognizing, communicating with, and treating patients who have meth mouth. So in your context, what can you tell us about your reaction to seeing a colleague with bruising to her neck area?
Thank you, Jocelyn. Quite honestly, I probably would be uncomfortable. I would probably go through, I think in my head, I would probably go through, what could this be? I'd ask myself, could this be the result of an accident? Could this reflect some type of medical condition, maybe a vascular issue? And then, of course, I would play out in my head, could this be the signs of some type of abuse? I probably would put into my head what I kind of knew about my colleagues' personal relationships, even see if I could maybe figure out who the abuser might be. And then, Jocelyn, I think I probably would try to figure out, how do I start the conversation?
Right.
And that would be uncomfortable. And probably, honestly, in the back of my head, I would ask myself, is this even my business? And that just might be the default so that I wouldn't ask the question. But Jocelyn, let me ask you, if you don't mind, like something very similar, what would you do? You heard my story. What would you do if you walked into your place of employment and you saw your employer laying on the ground strapped to a nitrous tank? Would you know what to say? Would you know what to do?
Well, I want to preface my response to that question by saying I have in the course of my 2.5 decades of working as a prosecutor, as a DA, and with defense counsel on the other side of the table, that I've suspected colleagues, I've suspected lawyers that I work with of having a substance use disorder. But I never sought to ask them about it. It was just not something that I felt comfortable about. And I have to say, in the legal profession, there's a very high rate of substance use disorders. So, to respond more directly to your question, I would have to say I would be embarrassed. I would be shocked. I mean, maybe I wouldn't be surprised that something had happened if I happened to know that, that the person was having issues with alcohol or drugs. But I'd probably turn around and be truthful. I'd turn around and walk away so I could collect myself a bit and think about what I should, or maybe more pertinently could do. And truly, if the circumstances were right, I might just pretend not that I didn't see it, because it would just be so overwhelming, from my perspective to, especially in an employer-employee type of situation. So
I think that's why we're, having this kind of dialogue, this conversation. One, it hopefully will help the audience know that our reaction or response might not be that different from their reaction or response, but really so that we can bring this issue of substance use and domestic violence to the forefront of conversations. And we can start learning to know what the signs are and how to interpret those signs, and also to hopefully be able to talk through resources for both safety and treatment for people that we are going to encounter in our life who do have a substance use disorder or are subjected to domestic violence. So before we kind of delve into the depth of our conversation, Jocelyn, could you just start off with maybe a definition of domestic violence so we make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and understanding it?
Yes, fair comment. So I first want to just let everyone know, that you have already heard and will continue to hear the term intimate partner violence, or IPV, which I may refer to it as, but also interchangeably, you're going to hear the term domestic violence, as you've just used. And that's actually a pretty common, more common definition. People have a better understanding of domestic violence, and they kind of appreciate what that is. So let's talk about what IPV is. Violence by an intimate partner is manifested by physical, sexual, emotionally abusive acts, as well as controlling behavior. And that's a very significant thing in the context of IPV, because different from stranger violence. In stranger violence or violence with a friend or in a bar, it's not about control. It's just about the violence. So that's a very big difference. The violence can also take forms which maybe the average person may not consider to be violence, but things like financial and spiritual abuse, taking a passport away so that a person has no freedom of mobility, isolating from friends and family. The forms may differ, but ultimately, as I've mentioned, the objective of the abuser is the same, and that is control. So, and I have to say, from in utero to throughout childhood, children are profoundly and very often irrevocably damaged by IPV. And if the audience can see the slide, there's some of the headlines about this research. But so that kind of is a brief definition of what we're looking at with IPV. Ronnie, can you on your side tell us a little bit more about what substance use disorder is? From your expertise.
Yeah, substance use disorder, Jocelyn, is a disorder in which someone, quite simply is using a drug in a way that's inappropriate, which means they're using the drug in a way it was really never intended to be used. They're using the drug, excessively, both in frequency and in quantity. And they're also using that drug dangerously, because when they drink that drink or they pop that pill, they're, putting their lives at risk. But in order for someone to be diagnosed with a substance use disorder, they have to meet at least 2 out of 11 criteria established by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And just really quickly, those criteria include if someone's using a drug in a situation that's dangerous or harmful. They're having that drink and then they're getting behind the wheel of a car. They're using the drug even though they are starting to experience a decline in their physical and mental health. They're using the drug even though it's worsening the relationship that they have with their friends and their family. They're using the drug even though it's making it difficult for them to meet obligations in their life. And the use of the drug is kind of worsening or escalating a legal situation. But also the use of the drug has become a problem. I think, Matt had really well articulated that because the individual has started to develop a tolerance to the drug. It takes more and more of the drug to experience its pleasurable effects. When the drug's not in the system, the individual will experience withdrawal. And the individual has begun to use more of the drug than they had ever expected for a longer period of time than they had ever anticipated. And now they're having difficulty not using the drug. So that's really kind of in a nutshell, the things that need to be kind of looked at in terms of kind of the diagnostic, as well as just kind of a basic definition of a substance use disorder. So Jocelyn, how many, based upon what you know, how many people are affected by domestic violence, intimate partner violence?
Well, that it's pretty staggering, actually. I'm going to make this statement, which is, verified by both the World Health Organization and UNICEF, namely that domestic violence is a global issue. They call it an international epidemic, is how the World Health Organization and UNICEF define the issue. And the loss of life annually, just to get a little bit of a sense comparatively, exceeds the loss of life from the COVID pandemic, like
Crazy.
Every month, every day, every week, every year. So the statistics suggest that approximately 1/3 of all women are victims of domestic violence during their lifetime. And really that translates to, that every 3 women that you and I know, whether, it's a sister or a mom or a friend or a colleague or somebody, a team member in your dental office, one of them has been a victim of IPV. And, really is a huge issue. And COVID has increased isolation, has increased the ability of the abuser to isolate the individual in the home. Unemployment is higher. So there's a lot more stress that's in the family. And so where you have domestic abuse anyways in the family situation, with COVID, it's become a more prevalent. I think the number is something like 8.1% higher during COVID than previously. So, and that's been described in the media as an epidemic within an epidemic. I know that the statistics are pretty scary as well with SUD. Can you tell us a little bit more about those statistics?
Yeah. So, with, what's been kind of hypothesized and analyzed is that there's about 23.5 million Americans with a substance use disorder. And as you kind of narrow down those statistics, Jocelyn, 23.5 million means that it's roughly 1 out of every 10 Americans, which means that roughly 1 out of every 10 dental professionals, right, has a substance use disorder. So those, results are definitely staggering, but also the impact that COVID has played, the lack of isolation, the increase in stress, job insecurity, housing insecurity, all these environmental stressors have really escalated it from already an epidemic level to one that is just definitely more heightened and more intense for so many Americans.
Wow. There's a lot of misconceptions around, I think, both SUD and IPV. So I'm going to talk a little bit about well, can you tell us a little bit about the misconceptions, first of all, with respect to SUD, and then, and then maybe I can do the same. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a lot of misconceptions. And I'll just kind of hone in on three. I think the first misconception, if we go is it's just a behavior choice, and if we go back to kind of that diagnostic, the diagnostic criteria, right? Using a drug in a harmful situation. So someone might interpret that, Jocelyn, as, wow, that's just a bad choice someone made. Or using more of a drug than one had intended, or for a longer period of time than one had expected, one might interpret that as, wow, that person just has a lack of willpower, a lack of self-control. But addiction is not a behavior, it's actually a disease. And it's been long recognized as a disease since, I think, 1956 by the American Medical Association. It's defined as a chronic, relapsing, progressive brain disorder that causes significant changes to the brain, changes to the limbic system, changes in one's ability to regulate pleasure and stress and self-control. And with other diseases, it has a genetic component, a biologic component, an environmental component. When left untreated, it creates that degree of disability and dysfunction. And then if left untreated, like other diseases, it actually leads to death. And in 2019, there were more than 200,000 Americans, Jocelyn, who lost their lives from an unintentional drug overdose death. Now, that's a staggering statistic, right? But it's a pre-pandemic statistic. So, similar to what you had alluded to, in 2020, March, the global pandemic collided with our nation's epidemic of addiction. And by the end of 2020, there was a 29% increase in drug overdose deaths in this country. And that's like the single greatest increase in drug overdose deaths ever recorded in this country. So the first misconception is this is just a behavior. It's not, it's a disease. The second misconception is, who does this impact? And addiction is indiscriminate. It's doesn't just pick out a certain socioeconomic class or certain race or whatever. It impacts all boundaries that we have in society. People who are wealthy have substance use disorders, as well as people who are not, people who are educated, people who are not educated. I think we have in our mind who that person is. That is that person under the bridge, or it's the people that I treat at the jail, but it's in all sectors of our society, and it's in our practice, it's in our population, it's in our profession. So that's the second misconception of who it impacts. The third misconception is, it's super easy to treat. Someone can just stop at any time. And the reality is that addiction is something that really takes a stronghold on brain and self-control and pleasure. And people oftentimes have to go through many cycles of recovery and relapse before they can experience long-term sobriety. So I would say those would be the misconceptions that I would want those listening to know. But Jocelyn, can you piggyback on that and just kind of share kind of with us and with me, what are the misconceptions around intimate partner violence?
Well, similar to what you've just talked about, actually, there's a lot of intersections in terms of the misconceptions. And I know you probably only touched on a few, and I'm going to do the same. I'm really going to try and focus on the top three misconceptions that, in my mind, are important to get people to start thinking about. And the first is that domestic violence is a private family matter. It's not. I mean, the very simple answer to that is it's everyone's business, and it's everyone's business because of the prevalence, because of the impact on the world, because of the impact on our children, the impact on our economy. I mean, it's absolutely costing billions in the United States alone, the impact of violence, whether it be, hospital visits or children who now require special assistance because their brains were compromised in utero and the like. So keeping violence secret doesn't help anybody. and it isn't a family matter. It's bad. This is the other concept, and you've already touched on that with SUD, so I won't belabor it. The idea that, yeah, it's bad, but it happens to someone else. It's that whole, not in my backyard. It's not in my culture, not in my socioeconomic situation, not in my church, and so on. So you've already talked about that, but what I do want to say is I personally in my career have prosecuted a judge in one case. I've prosecuted a politician. I've prosecuted police officers. I've prosecuted a homeless street person. I've prosecuted the wealthy, as you alluded to. It's not a problem that's confined to the poor. And I've prosecuted as young as a 14-year-old up to an 80-year-old, I think was sort of the outside limit. I've left the biggest misconception to my last point, and namely this idea that it's easy for a victim to leave an abuser. And there should be a slide up at this point, but which is kind of an in-your-face reminder that this concept that if it were me that was in that situation, I would leave, I would never allow someone to hit me, is bogus. I mean, we can't get into all of the dynamics and all of the reasons why people end up remaining in or returning to abusive relationships, but it's a bogus idea that if you were in that situation, you would just be able to walk away. And I'll tell you this, the most dangerous time for a victim is when they attempt to leave the relationship or when the abuser discovers that they plan to leave. So, that's exactly what happened to Serena. She told her abusive husband that she was leaving, and he strangled her to death in that moment, almost. So, so those are some of the misconceptions I think that are really important for audience to think about.
Yeah, thank you for kind of opening up all of our eyes, my eyes, about, the misconceptions, because we all harbor them. So Jocelyn, this is difficult. This is, it's difficult, being in that situation and trying to figure out what to say or what to do, not wanting to ignore. Why is this so difficult?
Well, I mean, I know from speaking with you in preparation for today that talking about IPV or SUD is difficult for many of the same reasons. And some of those reasons are a lack of formal training. Like we just don't get any, I mean, even in high schools, where really, in my opinion, they should be talking about dating relationships and about good relationships, behavior, and that, they don't, right? It doesn't happen. So there's that lack of education, much less, much less in a work setting, the work setting we're talking about, like it's almost non-existent. There's a limited knowledge of the issues, or even, what it is that, understanding what are we looking at? What are we seeing when Serena, jokingly laughs off something which an injury to the throat, or even if it were consensual rough sex, is dangerous conduct. Right. We don't know what to say. We don't want to offend, right? We are embarrassed. It's hard to find the right time, to talk to somebody, especially in a work relationship or a work situation. Who do I refer to? Like, I'm not a counselor. Like, who do I refer to? And, and you said this before or early in our conversation, not my business, right? Just not my business. So I'm going to ask you to, I know there are a lot of similarities. I may have missed some, though, in terms of SUD. Can you add any other observations through your lens?
Well, I think you pretty much highlighted. I think they're very similar. Lack of education. Most dental schools, most dental hygiene schools devote I don't know, less than 10 hours in over a 4-year period of time on kind of pre-doctoral education around chemical dependency, substance use disorders. So the typical hygienist, dentist graduating from dental school, like I did that October day, don't really know what to do or what to say. We have that fear of offending. And I think we also think that we have to fix this problem. So as a result, Jocelyn, when we are confronted with those moments, we're silent. We see the signs, but we're silent. And that silence perpetuates the isolation for the individual who is subjected to domestic violence or the individual who is suffering with a substance use disorder. It does, and it further, I think, stigmatizes our own idea of who these people are. So the silence actually is probably one of the worst things that we can do. So we have to figure out kind of what to say and what to do. But I think we also need to know what to look out for, right? So what would be some of the signs that we need to really look out for from that informed perspective so we can interpret and know what they are?
Okay, well, I'm going to start again, now, not to bore everybody, but with a couple more statistics. Domestic violence death review committees have been operating in the Western world for probably 25 years. And they have determined that in 75% of all domestic homicides that they have actually examined in a very detailed, in-depth way, 7 or more risk factors were present in those cases. And on the slide, hopefully our audience is looking at, I've set out a non-exhaustive list of the major risk factors identified by those death review committees. And I want you to keep an eye on it. I want our audience to sort of keep an eye on that slide as I share with you what I learned about Serena, because I want to return to her because she's, my purpose for being here. So what did I learn about her from her colleagues and from Dr. Bell, and why, from an informed point of view, one could readily have concluded she was in an abusive and actually very dangerous relationship. So turning to a little bit more of the facts, after her sudden marriage to Eric, her husband, in January, she stopped being this incredibly positive person that her colleagues described, as just like super outgoing, super, like bigger than life kind of individual, very positive. She stopped talking about her life and her children, which, she adored her 3 kids, and she stopped going for drinks outside of work. She stopped engaging in any really extracurricular activities with her colleagues, which she had been, quite close to. She went from being capable and confident, larger than life, to someone who didn't really engage. And even when there was an opportunity perhaps for her to go out, but her husband, Eric, because he was back and forth at this time between California and his home state. So they were kind of in transition in their marriage. And when she'd be invited, she would say, I don't think I can go because Eric will be jealous. Like, he'll be very upset. And I don't feel comfortable about that. She resigned from her job. She said she was moving to Pennsylvania to be with Eric. And she expressed concerns about her littlest boy. Like, her older children, were pretty independent. It was not a huge, thing for her to disconnect from them, at least physically, geographically. But her youngest one was only 6 years old. And Ari if she was going to join Eric, she was probably going to have to leave her youngest son with his bio dad, who was a great dad. Like, there was no issue with that. But she was pretty concerned and obviously distressed about that. She didn't speak of Eric in loving terms. She hadn't even told her colleagues that she married him until after the fact, if you can imagine. And then she came to work with the injuries that I've described to her throat and neck area, where she was asked about it, because I think her colleagues were pretty clear that it was pretty bad injury. And she blew it off. And then a week before her murder, she told a colleague that she was breaking up with Eric and that she was dreading doing it, that she was scared. But she was a woman of integrity, I'd say, and she did not want to do it by phone or text. So she traveled to Pennsylvania to tell him. And finally, I guess so. Finally, what does this all mean, right? I mean, in terms of what I see from an informed perspective, and what I see is highlighted in red on the slide that the audience is looking at. From my conversations alone, not knowing anything more about her or knowing what she actually would have known about Eric, there were 10 known risk factors or signs that Serena was in a potentially lethal situation with her partner. And indeed, that was borne out. So that's really, the perspective that I think we need to have is to be educated about what we're looking at. So, Ronnie, can you talk a bit more about the signs, the warning signs for SUD? I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, but I'd like our audience to hear a bit more about it.
So, I think it's, and I appreciate you sharing that because it allows us to really start looking for these signs with the individuals that we work with and live with and are friends with. In terms of a substance use disorder, definitely there's going to be some physical changes. It could be excessive weight loss that can't be easily explained, through diet or exercise. It could be kind of a disheveled appearance, lack of personal hygiene all of a sudden. A chronic fatigue appearance. In terms of behavior, someone who, as kind of described with Serena, who was kind of bubbly and confident, all of a sudden becomes very withdrawn or easily agitated or irritated. They may disappear for periods of time, spending excessive amounts of time in the bathroom, or just they're missing, don't know where they are. Physically, you might detect an odor. So, we know what the smell of alcohol smells on someone's breath. A vinegary smell is very indicative sometimes of heroin use. Very ammonia-like smell, very common with methamphetamine use. So it might also have a kind of odd presentation or odor. And then socially, all of a sudden their friend group has changed. They've disconnected with long-term friends, long-term family, and they kind of have a new crew, which is so different from who that person is. Their behavior is risky. They're frequently intoxicated when they're out in public gatherings. So that would just be a very quick synopsis. Of course, the manifestations will be dependent upon the substance being abused, but that's just kind of a very quick, I would say, summary.
Okay. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So what does the conversation look like, when we do suspect?
Well, first of all, I got to say, there's no special way to have a conversation, whether it be with a colleague or an employee or a friend. There isn't a special way. I think the most important thing is to be kind, to be compassionate. And so, again, I want to turn back to Serena, like in terms of the conversations that I had with her colleagues and with Dr. Bell. And thinking about what was present in terms of, from an informed point of view, in terms of signs of abuse. So a conversation with Serena. So let's say, her colleagues say, wow, what happened in relation to her neck and the bruising on her neck and throat. And she made the same response, but it was like, I got choked a little bit during sex. At that point, instead of just letting it go, you might say something like, when I see an injury like that, that makes me really scared for your safety because, being choked is something that is really dangerous and very significant. So, I've noticed other things really that concern me. I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you when you tell me that you're afraid and scared and dreading, talking to Eric about breaking up with him. Let's talk about that. So I think really it's kind of reframing in a way how we communicate with each other. Making some, I think, assertive statements rather than question. So instead of saying what happens, say, when I see something like that, this is what it tells me.
Mm-hmm.
It tells me that you're being hurt because, and I mean, nobody's going to disagree with that. I got to tell you from my experience with victims, they're not going to disagree with that statement. And it opens the door a little bit, right, to let them know that you're concerned. So I think it's not easy to spot. Like, this is not going to get us there in terms of being able to spot all the signs and so on. It's really hard to talk about. But we can, right? We can talk about it. We can ask questions. We can offer support. You can find a way to reach out, like find a space, find a time to reach out. And the most important thing is to ask. Like, just ask. And then if you do get an answer, even if you get a denial, just go on to validate. Just say, look, I don't know if you're being hurt, but it's okay. It's not your fault. And then the important thing, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about this, is to refer. Okay. You're not a counselor. You're not a therapist. You're not, so you're going to refer. And I would just conclude by saying, at least from my perspective, really everyone can spot the signs if you look for them, if you become educated about them. And if you do see the signs, then, reach out, right? And just ask, are you okay? So Ronnie, can you give us some other ideas about how we can have a conversation with someone who you think is suffering from substance use disorder? I mean, how can we help?
I think it's similar. I think it's similar. It's approaching it with a degree of curiosity. Curiosity out of concern and compassion. Is asking the question. Sometimes framing it with, "I'm really concerned about you. I'm really worried." I appreciate what Matt had said. Do you need help? Asking that question. How can I help you? But I think it's important, first and foremost, Jocelyn, there's no script. You walk into a situation, you're not going to have that script running through your head. It's not going to be perfect, but letting someone know that they're being seen and they're being heard, and that you see them and that you hear them makes the difference. It may not be a one and done. It may be multiple conversations, but that first conversation that you have opens the door. But I also feel, and in talking to, our colleagues, is that oftentimes we don't ask because we're not really clear about our role. We think that if we ask, somehow it's our responsibility to fix the situation. And, Jocelyn, I'm not a domestic violence counselor. I'm not a substance use counselor. So my job, though, is to refer. And that's really my role. And so I want people to know that in these conversations, you're not having a conversation because now you're taking the onus of it. You're having to solve this. You're taking it just like, I can't do that molar root canal. I'm going to refer to an endodontist. I can't do that bone graft. I'm referred to a periodontist. But to have resources, and I'm hoping that all of the audience can see the resource page that we have put up there, which lists resources that you can have in your office, whether it's for your staff members, whether it's for your patients, or even if it's for yourself, to be able to know where to go, who to refer to. And those resources do exist.
Thank you, Ronnie. So very true. It really is critical to get educated about the resources available in your own community, in your own backyard. Now, I heard your story at the beginning. Actually, that was, in spite of all the times that we've spent chatting, I had not heard that story in the context that you gave it. So can you share with us, like, how did this all end? Because I'm curious.
Yeah. So, Jocelyn, that was 1992. About 15 years later, about 15 years ago, I was at like a really large professional meeting. And I remember that it was lunchtime. I think I was in the buffet line, waiting to get my food. And I felt a tap on my shoulder. And when I turned around, there was Dr. T.
Oh my
And my heart
gosh.
started to pound. Because Jocelyn, I had not seen Dr. T since that
Wow.
October day in 1992. And I think probably you can figure out I never got my Monday start in his practice. But there we were at this professional
Wow.
meeting after so much time and kind of with so much things unresolved between us. And, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. But when I looked at him, I saw the man, Jocelyn, that I had so admired. I saw the man that I had respected. And then he took one step towards me. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Thank you, Ronnie."
Wow.
And I knew at that moment that the steps that I had taken that day had been the right steps, not just for Dr. T, but they had been the right steps for me. Because Jocelyn, when I went home that October day, I remembered, I don't remember how I remember, but I remember seeing something in the back of a CDA journal that talked about a wellness program for impaired dentists. I never imagined that I'd be calling as that young dentist who had completed a residency, who, just was starting her career, that now I'd be making that phone call. But when I made that call, and it was one of the most difficult calls to make, on the other end of the line was a dentist who was very compassionate, who reassured me that I had made the right decision, who listened to what I shared with him, what I had seen when I walked into the office, who verified that this was a dentist who was indeed in need of help. I was reassured that the call would be confidential. I was reassured that they had systems in place to help him find a path to recovery. And so I don't think it was Matt who picked up the phone, but I would like to invite Matt to come back onto the call, because I'm sure he provides that degree of reassurance, that degree of expertise to so many individuals who make that call and then are connected to him. So Matt, can you come back and talk a little bit about the well-being program?
I sure can. Wow. Thank you, Ronnie and Jocelyn. That is just powerful information. And it really reminds me that there is very often not one thing happening. There can be multiple things happening simultaneously. There can be substance abuse disorder, violence, and there can be mental health issues on top of that. So what does it look like? I was not the guy that Ronnie called, by the way. That was my predecessor. And I want to take a few minutes to sort of lead up to how we got to where we are today as a committee. 1984, Dr. Gail Kleffler was an oral surgeon from San Diego who referred himself to a treatment facility and was able to get help for his alcoholism. Part of what we do once we get sober is we do our best to help others, because that helps us stay sober. Ronnie talked about the relapse potential in substance abuse disorders. This is how we take care of ourselves, by passing it on. So Dr. Kleffler understood that if you're a dentist and you're getting in trouble with drugs or alcohol, you're going to go to the board. That's a law enforcement entity, and they tend to take law enforcement punitive approaches to treating addiction and alcoholism. So basically what he did is formed a committee that had a sort of handshake agreement with the dental board, where the dental board would take care of criminal activity, and the wellness committee, which was the well-being committee in those days, would steer people toward treatment and recovery for their substance abuse disorders. So things changed in 2008 when the state legislature decided that they would no longer allow the state board to do any kind of recovery. And that's when this committee sort of put it into high gear to create a formal program for dentists that are struggling with substance abuse disorders. So up to today, actually just prior to COVID, we became aware that medicine and dentistry was just behind, was starting to struggle with burnout. and the associated effects of that, the main one being suicide. So we decided to branch out and start to include resources, referrals for resources not related to substance abuse disorders. So that's why this information today is really bringing this all together into one package. So the bottom line is that the dental board is very public, very punitive. They are a law enforcement entity. We knew that to treat dentists who might be struggling with substance abuse disorders, we had to be 100% private and 100% confidential. In the heyday, there were 150 dentists in each of the boards program and the well-being program. And by the way, that was back in the days of the 3 martini lunches. I remember those were happening when I first came to town. It was kind of surprising, even for a guy like me that wasn't into recovery yet. But today there are 15 people in the diversion program and 10 in the wellness program. So we are not reaching people anymore. So we're reaching out in these new ways to try to make ourselves available to our members. Ronnie went through some statistics on the prevalence of substance abuse disorders. Let me bring it home to our membership, CDA dentists. Right now, there are about 30,000 dentists in California. This is an equal opportunity destroyer, the disease of addiction. And if you use a conservative number, and I'm going to use 15%, it may be closer to 10%, but let's just use 15. That means that there's 4,500 dentists in California right now who are eligible to really be under having treatment and monitoring to help them into recovery. And we have 25. So we're not reaching people, and we're taking certain actions to reach out to executive directors of the dental components, dental society components. So anybody who thinks they may have a problem or know a dentist with a problem or a dental team member with a problem can call their local dental society, or you can call the numbers that should be on the screen by now. But bottom line is that the drop-off in participation is connected to the isolation that's going on with COVID. And we're here to reach out to ask people to pick up the heaviest phone you've ever picked up in your life. If you know somebody that's struggling, everything will be confidential, and we are here to help. I'm not going to go over all the attributes that dentists and dental team members tend to display. Ronnie did an excellent job of that. The one thing I did want to mention is that the one thing that seems to not suffer is the quality of the dentistry. So don't think you can look into somebody's mouth and notice that a crown margin is off a little bit, and that's the way you'll figure it out. We seem to have a lot of training and a lot of excess capacity. We still end up doing our dentistry well, even when we're struggling. So that's most of what I have to offer. Again, the numbers are up on the screen. Those, by the way, are the cell phone numbers of different dentists in different parts of the state by region. I don't know if the regions are up there, but yeah, they are. So if you see a region there, that's the number to call. It doesn't matter who you talk to, but just understand that a person making the report will be protected. The dentist will most likely grab a fellow member. We're going to go meet with the dentist. That'll be organized by the person that calls. And all we're going to do is we're going to tell our stories and about the miracles that we become. And since we're not experts in the treatment or identification of the disease, we're simply going to invite the dentist or the concerned entity to be assessed by professionals. That's their only commitment, is to surrender to the examination and diagnostic process that's performed usually at a treatment center. And if it turns out that there isn't anything going on, they report back to us and they give us recommendations. If it is a substance use disorder, the dentist or the concerned individual will go off to a treatment facility, be treated, and then we will be supplied with what we call aftercare instructions that we then help supervise and implement. So that's sort of the nature of our program. We do work with a case manager who monitors people daily to make sure they're not using drugs, and they typically supervise them through a facilitated group process where they meet with them on occasion to see how things are going and give them support. Basically, we are there to facilitate that whole process. Being dentists and not experts, we are in recovery ourselves, as we just offer that camaraderie. So that's basically the program in a nutshell. And again, the new part of our program is to partner with people for things like suicide prevention, IPV, as you've learned here today, and so forth. So we're becoming a full service committee. So that's about it. And with that summary complete, what I'd like to do is welcome back Dr. P. Hope you're still there, and you can take us home.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Amazing. You know, in my history in running a hospital-based program, I also ran a diversion program. And it was for professionals, and we saw all kinds of professionals, and some of whom you'd think it was scary to think they needed it or scary for them to step forward, you know, pilots, for example. And the fact that it's there, the fact that the resources are there, it's so important. So what an incredible few hours we've had. I mean, this has been truly, truly so amazing. The CDA to put this together, I'm appreciative, I'm inspired, I'm in awe. Some of this has been inspirational, some of it has been scary, and all of it leads us back to hope. To hope. Remember to start with mindset and to pull out the magic formula. Mindset, accountability, gratitude, inspiration, and clarity. Focus back on what you learned about mental health in general, how it shows up, what it looks like. Substance use disorders, SUD, the acronym you heard. Start to be curious. Start to look at issues of domestic violence or IPV. And do not let stigma be the thing that stops anyone. Not you and not those you know from getting the support they need. It's up to each of us to have that conversation so that we can overcome stigma, which is really a killer. Remember that self-care, this is about you. Self-care is where you start. Think about what you can do for yourself and how you can integrate some of the exercises you learned today. How can you integrate those into your daily routine? Remember that when we get triggered by something, it's because it pushes on our identity, right? It could be something that someone says or something that someone does. If you're offended or feeling blamed or shamed, it's okay to say something. And remember that the thing that's triggering you is probably more about the other person than it is about you. So take some time tonight to reflect on your triggers. If you're feeling like you have to go or do something because there's this thing boiling up inside of you, it's good to know what they are. The key here is in identifying what your personal triggers are and having a response ready before it happens. What are you going to do the next time you find yourself overwhelmed, frustrated, or angry? What's your plan? And plan is the key here. So will it be that you're reaching out to someone or taking yourself out of the environment for a little while? Will it be seeking a more creative outlet, journaling, or playing music? I'm going to suggest you have language and a script ready to go. Reflect on your triggers and have a plan. The script could be something like, I have a different opinion and I choose not to be in this conversation right now. That's especially important around the holidays. There's all kinds of triggers coming up. So reflect on your triggers and develop a plan for yourself. Don't just let tonight be a bunch of good ideas. They are a bunch of good ideas, but don't let it stop there. How will you extend your plan or create a new one specifically so that it reaches your team and beyond? How would you build a culture of caring in your practice? That starts with your vision. It starts with your values. And when you align your vision with your values and turn that into action, and you ask how people are doing, and you ask in an interview for people to describe things that aren't potentially a normal interview, as long as that's not part of an interview, make it or break it kind of question, ask the new hires as part of bringing them on board. One thing that we heard today that will help you to lead your team in daily or weekly mindfulness exercises. Like, have a plan for doing that. Bring your team together. And if you're not comfortable doing that yourself, certainly there may be somebody on your team that is, or you could bring in outside experts. Taking just a few minutes to allow space for mental wellness for your team will bring a space of calm and peace. We all felt that. I know whether you participated in Dr. Garceau's exercises or just watched and felt the vibe flowing through the screen, we all felt more calm and more peace. And doing that together does build a beautiful and trusting culture. Jocelyn and Ronnie spoke about compiling and making resources easy for your team to access in your practice. Now we will make those resources available to you after the session, and some of the resources, the other resources that our speakers talked about today, will be on the CDA website and available for download. Some of the resources are directly on the speakers' websites. Roberta talked about accessing hers. I have a free masterclass on presence that you can access, and you can download one of my #1 best-selling books as well. So be sure to reach out to each of the speakers independently as well. You will also be able to access this recording after the event. I'm happy to be able to tell you that. And remember that one of the most important resources that you heard about today is the CDA Wellness Committee. Matt and his committee are here for you. So I'd like to leave you with one final challenge, and that is to create a culture of caring in your practice. It might look different for each of you. And talking about wellness, providing access to resources, and simply making space for discussion will all lead to a healthier dental team, a healthier practice, and that's for you and your patients. Truly, we hope that the last 3 hours have been impactful and meaningful for you. And honestly, this is just the beginning of a very, very important conversation. Please use the tools and experience you learned tonight to help you recognize, manage, and talk about your own mental health and that of your team members and your coworkers. It's critical we engage discussion, reduce the stigma of mental illness, and move mental health and wellness to the forefront of the conversation. On behalf of my fellow speakers, I will end where I started, and that is to say thank you. Thank you for being part of this very, very important conversation. Stay well. Good night.